so my name is Joscelyn Penton. I am from Fogo Island in Newfoundland. It's a little tiny island of about 2,500 to 3,000 people. Born and raised there, moved to Bridgewater, Nova Scotia 4 years ago. More of a home to me now than when I actually lived an hour and a half away from my hometown. So it's a great feeling to find another place to call home. Actually, we are moving to the Northwest Territories next week to start a new chapter of my nursing. I've always wanted to become a nurse. My grandmother would always tell me, be a nurse or a teacher, because a teacher, you get all your summers off and your weekends and your holidays. Sadly, a nurse doesn't get all of those. We get a couple days a week here and there kind of thing. But wouldn't change it for the world. I absolutely love nursing. I love caring for people. I've always been that way. Like I said, it was either a nurse or a teacher growing up, and I picked nursing. I can contribute a lot of that to my grandmother. We were very close. I took a lot of care of her as she started to get older. I was a nanny's girl growing up. She did quite a bit for me growing up, and in her later years, I returned that favor, did quite a bit for her. So I can contribute my nursing 100% to her. She made me basically the person I am today with the help of my parents. Still hard with her gone, but a lot of my nursing skills, the compassion that come with nursing, I can, like I said, 100% contribute or give credit to her for making me the person I am today and the nurse I am today. So my nanny passed away when she was 81. One of her favorite sayings was 80 good years and what odds about the rest. She passed away the month after her 80th birthday. She was born and raised on Fogo Island, had a family of 9 kids. Her husband passed away when she was only in her 40s, so she still had a couple kids left to raise. But she was one of those women I remember growing up, and I'd always ask her, like, Nanny, why didn't you get remarried? Or because she was such a young woman. And she would always tell me, I fell in love with one man. She said, just because he's gone doesn't mean I have to find another. So I feel, she had so much love for my pop. She was there right up until he passed away, in her arms. She was basically not a nurse by trade, but she was basically a nurse. She cared for a lot of people in our community of Jobet's Arm. She moved away when she was only 14 to what we would call basically a foreign community back home. She moved to Grand Falls, Windsor, and did home care for a couple at the young age of 14. Most 14-year-olds now, don't really know what work is or hard work is, let alone move away to a completely new town where nobody. And she got married when she was 16. Like I said, she had 9 kids. She came from a big family herself. Our family is huge. I think it's between 35 and 40 first cousins just on my dad's side. So she had all those grandkids, plus another 35 great grandkids by the time she passed away. So she always loved family. We always would have get-togethers at her home, what we would call a scoff on the weekend. She'd cook up a big feed for everyone. Hated to see anybody leave. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And she would always say, oh, there's lots of time. You don't have to go. There's lots of time. Sadly, there was. She was, she lived until she was 80. Wish she could have got more years after that, but she had so much family, so many friends, everyone cared for her. So even after my poppy passed away, she still had everyone. Like, everyone gathered at Nan's. It was Nan's for Christmas, Nan's for Easter, Nan's for Thanksgiving. She was just such a giving person to everyone that she knew. And if you ever left her house hungry, it was your own darn fault, because it's not because she wouldn't feed you. We're moving across the country, so we're going to the Northwest Territories. We do have some family in the Northwest Territories, which is awesome. And I also have two sisters that live about 10 hours away in Alberta. So we get to see our nieces and nephews quite a bit. When we go, we'll probably spend Christmas with them. And yeah, but it's a scary thought going to a place where you know nobody. Kind of the same feeling when I first moved here. I stayed close to home because of her. She was getting older. Like I said, I was a nanny's girl, so she kept me there. And then it was a month after she passed away that I gave up my job in Gander and packed up, and I was here by the 1st of December. I don't know, the aim is, hopefully to come back home. We're hoping to get a house, make a life here in Nova Scotia that's more permanent. Hoping to get a lot of different experiences, cultural for sure. Yeah, just for a change to try out a different part of life and see how it differs from Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. Well, believe it or not, Nova Scotia is a little bit behind in healthcare in a way, especially the documenting side of things. Here we went back to the old paper charting ways. So that took a little bit harder to get used to because I'm so used to electronic charts and whatnot. But Nova Scotia is getting there slowly but surely. And another huge thing was the language, the culture, the language. Even though it is a lot like Newfoundland, I've had patients before that people would tell me they couldn't understand me, which rightfully so. Some Newfoundlanders are a little hard to understand. But I did come across some patients that I absolutely had no clue what they were saying. And it was kind of weird because usually I'm the person they're like, pardon? What's that? What did you say? So that was a little bit different for me as well. But it took no trouble to adapt to Nova Scotia because Newfoundland and Nova Scotia are so much alike culture-wise, especially the smaller little towns around. It is, quite broken. Bridgewater alone has such an aging population, and there's no resources for them. There's no rooms for long-term care. You have patients who are awaiting these beds for assisted living or long-term care homes that are in the hospitals, not taking off acute care beds, but there's better places for these people. Like medically, there's nothing that that we can do to fix these problems that some people come in with, but they're not safe to go home, so they're housed in an acute care facility, which kind of contradicts what we are trained to do, because Bridgewater is an acute care facility, and we always have long-term care patients awaiting beds. So I find that hard to grasp because you have people who really need these beds that have to sit and emerge for days upon end because there's no beds available on the floors for them to go into. And most patients who are admitted spend most of their stay in emerge and get discharged from emerge because we have no beds to put them in, because we have such an aging population that are needing long-term care, but we don't have the space in long-term care to put them in. Well, for one, we could change our government a little bit. They seem to have a hard issue grasping that healthcare is in such dire straits here. If you're not, it's kind of fair and unfair to say that if you're not a frontline worker, you don't quite get what's going on, because the government and the media portray it a lot differently than the staff and nurses, management perceive it to be. So it's hard to grasp that. As I was telling you this evening, I ended up going off work back in March for a month. Really contemplated my nursing. It was really hard. It's stressful. You don't have the resources. You don't have the time to provide the care that you feel you need to give, or like personally have to give, because there's just no resources for you to be able to do that. There's not enough staff to be able to do that. and the government kind of turns a blind eye and says, oh, well, you know, you guys are doing fine, you guys are doing fine. But it's not. If it doesn't change, it's just going to continue to go on a downward spiral. And it's easy to find staff to get the blame for things when we have no control over what happens, who goes where, you know, who's staying in the bed, who's getting discharged. So it's, you know, you hear a lot of hateful comments from people towards frontline workers who are trying to do their best. But again, they can't because we don't have the resources to go above and beyond the basics, really. The way I see it, I watched my grandmother go through, you know, hell and back when she got really sick towards the end of it. And I treat everyone as if, you know, I would want her to be treated if she were still around. And it's really hard to do that because they tell you, oh, don't take your work home with you. But as a nurse, there's no way you can't not take your work home with you.